Shalom, good afternoon, good evening. We look forward to starting in about 2 minutes. Thank you for joining us, and depending on where you are, afternoon in North America, evening here in Israel. I know we have some people in the UK that emailed me, so we have some late afternoons in the UK. We'll be getting started in about 2 minutes. Again, good afternoon, good evening. We're going to get started in about a minute. We just went over 200 participants and are excited to get our virtual Cafe Oleh back up and running tonight. And we will get started just about 30 seconds. Let everybody who wants to join. Shalom, welcome to the restart of the virtual Cafe Oleh. I am very happy that we are back on the road after 6 or 7 weeks of a break. My name is Josh Sussman. I work in the marketing and program team at Nefesh B'Nefesh. I'm happy to once again have Jay Rosen back with us, who is graciously volunteering his time to bring us what is a very, very popular session. When I sent out an email, I don't know, 6 or 7 weeks ago, saying that we were going to be on hiatus for our big program month and Pesach, I got so much positive feedback. All the credit to Jay. So we thank him graciously for his being willing to offer his time and expertise with us. We've changed up a few things for those of you who have been participating in these sessions for the last year or so. I want to give you a touch of a history. This started in our Tel Aviv hub office, and it had, on a weekly basis, would have 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 people. And that was it. It was a nice little way for people to schmooze in Hebrew after Ulpan or over lunch in the hub. And then we turned it virtual with the pandemic, and all of a sudden we had hundreds of people able to participate. And it's grown from there. I'll tell you that when I sent out that original email with the hiatus, we sent it out to 248 people who had registered in January, February, and March and participated. We have 820 some odd people registered for this evening's program. So it has grown, expanded. Apparently Jay's popularity the word has spread. I do want to mention to those people who have been participating in the past that we changed the registration a bit. This is switched from a meeting format to a webinar format, which means you will be getting an automated reminder with the, hello?
Can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay. You should be getting an automated reminder each week with the link. So don't worry about having the link sent to you. It will be coming to your email, to your inbox automatically. All of the sessions are being recorded and will be put on the NBN YouTube channel with its own playlist dedicated to Cafe Oleh. The last 20 some odd sessions are already there waiting for you. If anybody wants to review things that you learned previously or haven't participated in the past and want to go back and use those recorded sessions, we will not be sending out the recordings every week. They will be put up within 24 hours or so onto our YouTube channel, and you can easily access them there, both the new sessions and any previously recorded sessions. Again, thank you for being with us. I just want to say we have the next few sessions updated on the registration page. Tonight we'll be dealing with media literacy. Jay and I were working to figure out how we could put a positive spin on the latest news. I'm not sure that the news cycle delivered anything like that, but Jay will still do a phenomenal job of putting a good spin on it. Next week we have grocery shopping for Shavuot with a focus on dairy products, and we will have a special guest chef who will share a recipe with us. We're going to try to expand on some of the stuff we've done in the past. After Shavuot, we have the importance of being passive, and then we have a really basic how to read your electric bill for those here in Israel. Jay always is open to suggestions, questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat. Jay will address them as he goes, towards the end of the session, not as he goes. And if you do have any questions or suggested topics that you'd like to hear about, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, or you can always email me, Josh Sussman, jsussman@nbn.org.il. And with that, I will give the floor to Jay. Thank you all for being with us.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. Welcome, and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. Those of you who are brand new, welcome. Those of you who are returning, really glad to have you here in our, as we say in Hebrew, mishupatz, our gilsa mishupetzet, our updated, renovated version here, where we've switched over to a webinar, and you'll be able to ask questions directly to me via the Q&A function. So as opposed to when we were doing this before Pesach, you'll see at the bottom the Q&A. If you have questions as I'm talking, please write them there, and I'll be able to get to each of them towards the end, as Josh said. And likewise, if you have any topics that you'd like us to cover, this really is meant to be as user-friendly as possible. So if there are topics you'd like us to cover, by all means, do so. If this is your first time at Cafe Oleh, or you forget a little bit about what we do here, this is meant to be the Hebrew that you may or may not be taught in Ulpan, let alone wherever you've learned Hebrew in the past, if you have at all, but is really meant to be for everyday life in Israel. Recognizing we have a lot of people on this call who may have not yet made Aliyah, which is fantastic, important to get a leg up. But we're really trying to focus on, if we were back in the hub here in Tel Aviv, where I live, to be able to walk out of the office as we're finished and to be using the Hebrew that we learn here. You can hear from my accent, I'm originally from the United States. I myself made Aliyah with Nefesh B'Nefesh almost 15 years ago. And in my full-time job, I help people speak English, or whether they're native English speakers or not, volunteer here and a few other places speaking Hebrew. I'm really excited to be back. What we're gonna do today, as Josh said, is media literacy. This is, I think, one of the most important lessons we do here, and also based on the feedback we get, one of your favorites. And this comes from a very specific place of seeing fellow Olim struggle with Hebrew, more particularly what goes on in Israel. And it comes from two important places. First off, most of the people here are at very different levels, but we have a lot of beginners. So we really focus at a more intro level here. If you're looking for something more advanced, more conversation, we may be able to provide that for you in the near future. That's not this class. But equally important, people come here, especially when they make Aliyah, which is a very different experience than being here on holiday, being here on a trip, being here on a delegation. And as such, the local news, the news that happens here in Israel, is not so relevant to an outside audience, right? You don't need to know the traffic jams for the day, or what crimes were committed. But this is a small country, and those things are national news here, right? And so the vice versa is true. English language media that comes out of Israel, and we can think of those off the top of our heads, right? Jerusalem Post, Haaretz English edition, and more recently, Times of Israel, are not made for local consumption. They're not. You can read it, it's certainly not blocked, but it's not meant for us, because here in Israel, we maybe have a couple 100,000 people who speak English at a primary or secondary level, versus millions and millions and millions of people outside of Israel who are interested in finding out what's happening here. And thus the news has to be relevant for them. If you're living here in Israel, it's not so relevant. You're not going to hear about breaking news in English for at least a couple hours. And I've seen this happen in my 15 plus years here in Israel. Trust me when I say that. So with that, I'm going to teach you, regardless of what level you're at, and especially intro, I'm going to teach you media literacy. I'm going to teach you very quickly how to recognize, how to first off navigate almost every major news source in Israel, media source in Israel. And second, I'm going to take you through some of the context clues you can see to see what you need to focus on and what you can ignore for the time being. What you need to struggle with to perhaps translate and sit there for a few more minutes to read, and things that are less pressing, I can read in my leisure, and so forth. Okay, so with that, I'm going to share my screen. As Josh indicated, all of our previous current and upcoming sessions will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. You are welcome to screenshot throughout this. And again, you will have access by just going to Nefesh B'Nefesh's YouTube channel. You just type in Nefesh B'Nefesh on YouTube. You can even type in Cafe Oleh and you'll find us. Click and subscribe, as those of you who are used to YouTube will know. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to take you through what we normally do in our class, which is each class I come up with a lesson that we're doing. Today's media literacy. I take a screenshot or I bring together vocab words you're going to see in a minute in Hebrew with the dots and the bars that indicate vowel sounds. It's called nikud in Hebrew. Transliteration for an American audience, but it's open obviously for everyone, and English with some notes. So right now, let's jump right into it. You are looking at a screenshot of Ynet. Ynet is the online portal, is the online version of Yediot Ahronot, as you see here at the top right. Okay, Yediot Ahronot is one of Israel's oldest newspapers. It's one of the oldest modern Hebrew newspapers still in circulation. It's still one of the most popular. Ynet is one of the most popular online news sources in Israel. And this is how their front page looks. Now, I took a screenshot earlier today. As you're going to see, it will constantly change, but this is just one example of a few that I go through of mainstream news source in Israel to get the most updated, pressing news that is not opinion, that is not skewed towards one ideology or another. Ynet sits squarely in the center. In terms of ideology, it actually doesn't come so much with an ideology, except in its op-eds, just like all major news sources do. But Ynet is considered one of the biggest ones. So let's look at some of the geography before we dive into the top story and some of the breaking news on this day. So at the top right, like I said, that's the logo for Ynet. Ynet obviously standing for Yediot Ahronot, net, internet, online. At the top, just like with other media sources you may be used to in your own country of origin, in English, in whatever language, is all the different categories. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just like you have in any major media source, media channel in your respective countries, so too we have here. So we have everything from news, chadashot, podcasts, opinions, economics, sport, culture, celebrity gossip. Yes, we do have celebrity gossip here in Israel, health, and so forth. Okay, we have dozens and dozens of categories here, all sorts of different other things. And if you see, it even goes, there's even more, right? The next line here, after the Ynet logo, we have the weather, we have all sorts of other things. Far on the left, you can see that Ynet has expanded to other languages. So we have Espanol and Spanish, Vesti, which is Russian, and English. Just like I said before about those other English media outlets, unless it's such breaking news that it affects both Israel and diaspora, it's not going to be the most up-to-date. So if you go to what's called ynetnews.com, which is the English equivalent of this, it's not going to be nearly as updated as what we're about to go through. Okay, both because of relevancy and also because of staffing. They simply don't have enough English speakers to make it relevant, both work-wise, but also readership-wise. Okay, we're on Ynet. And so what we have here, after you go through the top category, right? You have the top story, and then you have the top story here is in the center. Okay, on Ynet, the geography looks a little different than some of the other websites, but it's all the same content, meaning the masthead, the name of the company and its various categories are at the top. The chief article is here in the center, the top story. And then the breaking news, the ticker, is on the right-hand side. You'll see when we do this session again in a couple of weeks, when we do another media outlet, you'll see the geography may be slightly different, right? On one of them, the ticker is on the left side. On one of them, the ticker is at the top. But they're all built more or less the same way. Top story is the biggest one at the top. And then you get to the breaking news on as a ticker, and then the down stories. What we're just going to focus on today is the top story and the breaking stories that I screenshot here. Okay, again, we're not, the takeaway from this lesson specifically today is not to know every single word that's here in Hebrew. That's not the point. The point is, what are the key words that I as an Oleh, I as a beginner Hebrew learner, user, consumer need to know in order to determine for myself, is this worth my time reading? Is it important for me to read? Or can I move on? Can I wait for it to appear in English because it's not so important to me or it's not so urgent? Okay, so I'm gonna scroll down. This is the main shot, right? So I took that main story and I took from it some of the big words. Again, I'm gonna read through the Hebrew on the right-hand side, but I'm not expecting you to follow along with this because again, this isn't about understanding all this headline and then the 5 lines under it. It's to understand what are the words I'm looking for, and I'm going to point them out as we go along that indicate how I can better and more effectively read the news in Hebrew, even if I'm not even close to being fluent or don't think I am. Okay, so as we said, this is the top story. We know it's the top story because it's the one that appears at the top with the biggest amount of space. It has the date, both Gregorian, so the 3rd of May, 2021. Again, Israel, like most countries in the world, with the exception of the United States, we go from day, month, year. So it's in that order. So it's the 3rd of May, 2021. And underneath, because this is Israel, it also has the Hebrew calendar date. So Yom Sheni, Kaf Aleph Be'iyar, Tashva, which is the Hebrew calendar date. Okay, so we have here 2 things that are important: the headline, the summation under it, and a picture at the left. I want to start with the picture on the left because you see that banner at the top left of the corner in red. Whenever you see red at the top of an article, and we're going to go through other media outlets in future classes that have a red bar before you even get to the headline. It's a 2-word summation of what this is about before you even get to the headline, which itself is a summation of the article, right? You see that red bar? That's telling you this is something extra special. In this case, the word, and you'll see here on the right-hand side, we already have our first vocab word of this class is chasifa. Chasifa comes from the verb lachsof, which is to expose. Chasifa is an expose. Okay, so it's something that's breaking news. It's an expose. It hasn't been shared yet. It's being exposed. It's being shown for the first time. And that's what this article is about. Okay, so first off, we know this is breaking because it's got that red banner on it. And if we don't see it here, we see it on other media channels. And second, because the word chasifa means expose. So there's something going on here we should pay attention to. Okay, so the headline, again, center of the picture screenshot here, the 2 lines in big, bold, black Hebrew. I'm going to read it, and then we're going to go through it together. Okay? המסמך שחושף את המחדל, הדרישה, 4 דרכי מילוט. Okay, what are they talking about? So first off, if you don't know anything that's being talked about, look at the picture and try to figure out what we're talking about through some context clues like you would use in anything else. If you can recognize the picture, great. If not, also don't worry about it. This is the continuation of last week's tragic story from Har Meron, Mount Meron up in the north during Lag BaOmer on Thursday night, where 45 people were killed and hundreds were wounded. And this article is a chasifa, it's an expose, because in the aftermath of it, if you've been keeping up with the news in any language, you know that they're trying to figure out who's responsible for what happened and who can we assign blame and responsibility so that this doesn't happen again, but also to make them accountable for what happened. So this article is one of many in the past few days that are trying to figure that out. And here's an expose, and it says, HaMismach, back to the main headline here, HaMismach shechosef et hamechdal. Okay, so we had the word chasifa, expose. Mismach is your second word here on the right, row 27. Okay, mismach is a document. Okay, any kind of document is a mismach. So the document, shechosef, chosef is related to that word we just had, chasifa, right, expose. So the document that exposes et ha-mechdal. Mechdal is one of the two words that is being using to describe what happened this past Thursday night. Mechdal, as you see here, is the next word in our vocab list, is an oversight or a screw up. Okay, mechdal is something along the lines of an error. It's not necessarily giving more than that, but it's a screw up. It's something that intentionally went wrong. Not necessarily intentionally went wrong, but that shouldn't have gone wrong. That's a better way to put it. Something that shouldn't have gone wrong is a mechdal. Okay, so ha-mismach shechosef et ha-mechdal. The document that exposes the screw up or the oversight or the lack of oversight, if you want to translate it a little bit better for English. Okay, quotation mark. When you see quotation marks in Hebrew news, just like in English news, it means it's either a direct quote or it's attributed to someone specific. Okay, so hadrisha. Hadrisha, next word here, row 29, the demand. Arba darkei milut. Okay, the demand, 4 ways out. Next word here, derech milut. Okay, so the document that exposes the oversight or the screw up, the mess up. Quote, the demand for evacuation routes. So what is this talking about? As you heard about the news, the terrible news that happened, there was only one way out of the festivities for Lag BaOmer, and it's been that way for many years. And this expose, this breaking news is saying that there was already a document that was demanding, right, drisha, a demand, for evacuation routes, meaning 4 ways out. Those of you who live here in Tel Aviv, we have a very weird sign that you may have encountered by the beach, or if you've been to Tel Aviv recently, and it has a sign for an evacuation route in the event of a tsunami. Now, thankfully, in this part of the Mediterranean, tsunamis are not very common, but there is this signage everywhere along the beach and in Tel Aviv, and it says on it, derech milut. Okay, it's the way out. It's also evacuation route. Okay, so either way, it's recommending this document that we're about to hear about is recommending 4 different ways out, or 4 different evacuation routes, as opposed to the one that created the situation. Okay, so let's go into it a little bit more. So, we did the headline, right? Now we're going to read in the smaller print. Now, it is smaller print. If this is too small for you, by all means, you're welcome to come back to it another time. I'm going to go through it. There aren't as many words here that I think are important. There are some at the bottom that, again, I pulled out because I think they're important for you to understand not just this article, but future articles and what's happening here. So I'm going to read this slowly, and we're going to translate it line by line. Starting right here. Lidei Ynet, right? Ynet is the name of this news agency. Lidei Ynet, higia mismach mafteach, she'asfu chokrei machash, דוח דרישות הכיבוי ממתחם תולדות אהרון במירון. 8 ימים לפני האסון. Okay, so let's stop here. The first two lines and the next 2 words. Lidei Ynet, at the hands to Ynet, or at the hands of Ynet, higia, arrived, mismach, the word we just had, a document. Mismach mafteach, not just any document, a mismach mafteach. A mafteach is a key. Right? So a key document, just like we would say in English, we say in Hebrew. A key document has arrived at the hands of Ynet. She'asfu chokrei machash. Okay, asof, la'asof is to gather or to put together. Chokrei machash. Machash is an important word for you to know because this is an important part of Israel's own, I would say, governance and how things happen here and law enforcement and all the things that are in the news anywhere in the Western world, and certainly here in Israel is no different. Machash is an abbreviation. In Hebrew, we've talked about this many times in Cafe Oleh. In Hebrew, we do not use periods to indicate an apostrophe like we do in English and in other languages. What we do is we take two apostrophe marks. In Hebrew, the two of them together are called gershaim, or gershaim, you can't say the English, and we put them between the second to last and last letters. Okay, so machash, you can immediately know, whether you know what the word means or not, and regardless of what level you're at, I can see machash and I instantly know that's an abbreviation for something, right? In Hebrew, just like in other languages, we pronounce it like a word. We don't spell out the letters like we do in English at times. We use it as one word. Machash stands for, as you see here in row 30, Hamachlaka Lachakirot Shotrim. Okay, Machash stands for the Department of Internal Police Investigations. Just like you have in any police force around the world, hopefully, at least in democratic societies, you have within the police, or that sits next to the police, its own internal affairs, right? To make sure that police are doing what they're supposed to be doing and not doing what they're not supposed to be doing. So Machash is an important part of overall governance in Israel, just like it is in other countries in the world, to conduct investigations on the police's conduct. So לידי ynet הגיע מסמך מפתח שאספו חוקרי מח"ש. A document, a key document, right, מסמך מפתח, has come to the hands of ynet that was put together, אספו, collected or added together, חוקרי מח"ש. חוקר is an investigator. חוקרי מח"ש are the investigators of מח"ש, so the internal affairs detectives of מח"ש, right, the detectives of Machash, put together this information in this key document. Duach drishot hakibui memitcham toldot Aharon b'Meron. Okay, so Duach looks just like Machash, right? There's two apostrophes, Gilshayim, between the second to last and last letters, so I instantly know that is an abbreviation for something. Duach is our next word here. Duach, or it's often heard here in Israel as doch, is short for din v'cheshbon. Din is judgment, cheshbon is account. This is the word in modern Hebrew that we've created to mean a report of any kind. It could be a report to a board of governors. It could be a report to your boss. It's also the word that we use for a ticket or a citation. So if you do something that's ticketable here in Israel, let's say you park incorrectly, or you are caught riding your bike without a helmet, or you are caught riding your electric scooter in the improper place, and a policeman catches you and finds you, they give you a doch or a duach, and that's your citation, right? It's a report. It's your accountingness for what you committed, right? So that's the word that we have for report in Hebrew, a very important word you'll hear again and again. And obviously here, this is very important because we have this key document, Mismach Mafteach, that is, and what is it? It's the Duach Drishot HaKibui Mimitcham Toldot Aharon b'Meron. Okay, let me explain what's going on here, because it's a little bit more nuanced if you haven't been following the news. So we have this report, Drishot HaKibui. We had that word Drisha before, right? Drisha is a demand. Drishot are demands, it's the plural version. So a report of demands, kibui. Kibui is firefighting. Okay, lechabot is the word that we use to turn off electricity, but also to extinguish a fire. So kibui is firefighting in modern Hebrew. Okay, so a report of demands of the firefighters or firefighting, me mitchan toldot Aharon b'Meron. Those of you who are following the news know that the crowd, the word that we use that isn't stampede, but basically what happened was taking place in and around and shortly after the second bonfire that took place with the Hasidic group called Toldot Aharon. That's the name of this community, Hasidic community called Toldot Aharon. They have a specific section, a mitcham. A mitcham is a compound, as in like a space. That's our other word here. Drishot hakibui me mitcham Toldot Aharon b'Meron. Right? So this report is referring to a firefighting demands for firefighting of crowd control, but also for fire control in the compound that belongs to or is associated with Toldot Aharon b'Meron. Meron is referring to Har Meron, the cemetery where this took place. Right? So this key document arrives to Ynet. That is a duach drishot hakibui. It's a list of demands with regards to firefighting for this specific section that helped instigate the tragedy that took place. Okay, and why is this even more important? Because of the end of the sentence, right? The end of the second line, Shmona yamim lifnei ha'ason. 8 days, Shmona yamim, 8 days, lifnei, before ha'ason. Ason is the word that we're typically using to describe what happened. Ason in modern Hebrew is a tragedy, a calamity, a disaster, anything really bad. The difference between it and our other word, mechdal, is that ason is used for something that typically is unpreventable. It's a tragedy. We don't necessarily know who's at fault, but it's a tragedy regardless. Mechdal indicates that it could have been prevented, right? Because we said a screw up, an oversight. Mechdal indicates something could have been different. Ason doesn't give us that. Okay, so already we have lots of context clues in the headline, in this top picture, and in the first line of this summation of the article. We have the word mechdal versus ason, right? Ason, we just said, means a calamity, a disaster of all kinds, but mechdal is like, it means that something was preventable. It means a screw up. So either there was human error, there was technical error, there was something different there, and that they used the word mechdal and not ason indicates to us something's about to be exposed, right? Because we have that word chasifa. That's going to tell us differently. Okay, I'm going to read through this a little bit quicker just so that we can get through it, because again, the idea is not to get through the specific article, it's to understand what are the keywords to look for to see if this is relevant to you. Mefaked hatachana, we're in the third line here. Mefaked hatachana הציב הנחיות ברורות למנהלי ומארגני האירוע, אבל התפוסה עלתה בהרבה על הצפוי ואיש לא אכף את הדרישות. המחדל, let's say word again, המחדל, שחור על גבי לבן. Okay, what they're talking about here is the officer, the head of the local firefighting station. And that's what this, by the way, this screenshot on the left is. Everything you see here at the top is referring to the Firefighters Association of Israel. It's the National Association of Firefighters. And it's coming from the North District, from the office, the station, the firefighting station that's assigned to this area, to Har Meron, to the cemetery where this took place. And what they're talking about is in this duach, right? The duach of drishot, the report of demands, is talking about hanchayot brurot, very specific guidelines as to what needs to happen. And we already heard that in the headline, right? Those arba dalkei milut, those 4 evacuation routes. Okay? And it's saying that they gave very explicit hanchayot brurot, clear instructions to the quote, and you see here the quotation marks, just like we do in English. Menahale umalgene ha'irua, the organizers and the heads of the event. Aval, 4th line here, aval atfusa alta beharbe al hatzafui ve'ish lo achaf et adrishot. Again, I don't want you to pay attention to that. I'm just going to summarize it for you in English, right? Because that's not the point of this exercise. What they're saying is that they gave 8 days before the event, the head of the firefighters in the area gave very clear instructions as to what needs to happen with regards to both crowd control in the form of evacuation routes, but also how many people should be attending. But as it says, the capacity went above and beyond what was expected, and no one enforced the demands that the firefighters gave. Okay, and that's even said here in this screenshot at the top, all in the picture that you see on the left, are all the different drishot, the demands that the firefighters had. And one of them says at the very end, Ba'avur tfusa gdola mi-9,000 anashim yu 4 darkei motza lefachot. For an event that has over 9,000 people in capacity, there needs to be at least, 4 evacuation routes, 4 ways of exiting. We know there were plenty more than 10,000 people there. There was only one evacuation route. This last line of the small one, though, I want you to focus on, because again, what are the words that are being used to describe what we're discussing? What is the main event happening, and what are the words being used to describe it in as few words as possible? To understand, do I need to read this? Do I want to read this or not? Ha-mechdal, right? The very last line in this paragraph. Ha-mechdal, shachor al gabe lavan. Mechdal we already had, right? Is the oversight, the screw up, something happened that was either technical and or human error. Shachor al gabe lavan. Now this is an expression, and I translated for you here in row 32. Shachor al gabe lavan. Shachor means black, the color black. Al, on. Gav is a back, is your back. Lavan is white. So this is an expression, because if you were literally to translate it, it wouldn't make so much sense. Black on the backs of white. That's not what it means. It means it couldn't be more clear, or it couldn't be more clearly written, or it's as clear as black as white, as clear as black and white. If you want to get closer to an American or English expression, right? It's clear as night and day, as clear as black and white. It's black on white. So what they're trying to say in this chasifa, in this expose, is that this wasn't an ason. It wasn't just an ason, because they're not using that term as much, right? They're using the term mechdal. It was a technical and or human error, a screw up, an oversight. And to further emphasize that is this last line before we get to the full article, ha-mechdal, the oversight, the screw up, shachor al gabe lavan, meaning the screw up, it couldn't be clearer that this was a screw up and not just a tragedy. Okay, so already you have some context clues in this first article. No matter what you've read or not read in English about what's happened in the further development since Thursday night, to understand what's the latest news. And this is the latest news because this was the top story. And we know it's breaking because of that red banner, Chasifa. And we can see this is quite an explosive document, right? This is a document that came out 8 days before the event and coming from an official government body, firefighters of Israel saying something was wrong already to get go. Okay, so you already can understand how to find the context clues to see what's important to read, and what priority do I need to keep reading? Do I need to start translating? Whatever you do. I want to take you to one last part of that first page, which is, I think, equally, if not more important. And then I see we have questions in the Q&A and get to any of those. So if we scroll back to the top, right, we had all the categories at the top. We have the main story in the center, and then we have Mivzakim. Mivzakim, this is the ticker, right? And I took the ticker and I screened and I blew it up so you can see it even more clearly. We're going to go through the 3 that I happen to screenshot because, again, it's a ticker. It goes in a loop until it's updated and then something new's added. Mivzak means something that's breaking or it's flashing. The root, the shoresh, the 3 letters that make up this word, bet, zayin, kuf, have to do with lightning. Or in the Bible, this is used for something that's a flash of light. And as you know, as we talked about many times here at Cafe Oleh, every Hebrew word has a shoresh, has a root of 2, 3, 4 letters. It's usually 3 letters. And those 3 letters, in a very specific order, in a very specific construct, create new words. So in this case, we have the word mivzak. And if it sounds familiar to those of you who are already here in Israel, you're right. It is the same shoresh as bezek. Bezek is the name of our largest telecommunications here in Israel. It's the exact same root, and it has the exact same meaning. Bezek is the actual word from the Bible, the Tanakh, that's used to describe a flash of light or lightning or something that's like a bolt of light. And that was the word when the first telecommunications company opened at the beginning of the 20th century in pre-state Israel to describe that flash of current that went through the lines to relay information. I think it's pretty cool to think about using these very ancient words to describe a very modern phenomenon, such as telecommunications. We use the same root to mean flashing or breaking news, just like we say in English, right? Breaking or flashing, this idea of something flashing across our screen, mivzakim. So if you're ever looking for what's the most updated breaking news, you're going to look for this word. And it appears on all the different news outlets. Next to the ticker, it'll say mivzak, or mivzakei chadashot, or mivzakim as we have here. Okay? So, mivzakim. And I have 3 of them here. We're going to go through each one. Full disclosure, like Josh said before, the news isn't always pretty. That's a part of life, whether you're here in Israel or elsewhere in the world. So these aren't the most uplifting things because these are the breaking news. Sometimes they are. Happens today was not a great news day positivity-wise, but they're still important because this is what's locally consumed by fellow Israelis. So let's start with the first one here at 11:24. It says, "Lamrot she'adayin lo oshru ba, Pfizer, תתרום להודו חיסונים בשווי יותר מ-$70 million. Okay, so I picked ones that are still relevant for everyone to know around the world, but it's important to know likewise how it's related in Hebrew. So what does this say? Lamrot. Lamrot is a very good expression for you to have under your belts, regardless of your Hebrew level. Lamrot and lamrot she, it's usually followed by the preposition prefix she, means despite, or regardless, or those are the 2 usual translations. Despite is usually the good one. Lamrot she, so despite, adayin lo oshru ba, despite, adayin means still, lo not, oshru ba. Ushru ba comes from the verb ushal. Ushal is was approved. If you were here at the beginning of the lesson, you heard Josh talking about future lessons. One of them is going to be on the importance of being passive. In Hebrew, passive tense is considered very good Hebrew. Forget what you were taught in grade school, especially from America, my fellow Americans. The passive tense in Hebrew is considered very high-level Hebrew. I know in English, we're often taught not to use the passive tense, right? To be something, to be approved. In Hebrew, it's very good Hebrew. So in this case, ushru is even though or despite it hasn't been approved, and we're about to find out what hasn't been approved, but we know it's plural because it's ushru. It's conjugated for past tense plural. So even though it wasn't approved, Pfizer, and you should know that word by now, Pfizer, the name of the pharmaceutical company. Pfizer, Titrom, will donate lehodu. Hodu is the word in Hebrew for the country of India, the nation of India. So Pfizer will donate to India chisunim, this word we know, hopefully we all know by now. Chisunim are vaccines, vaccinations in Hebrew. It's the same word. Pfizer will donate to India vaccines, bishovi, that's our next word. Shovi is an amount or equal to. It comes from the same root of the word meaning equals in Hebrew, but shovi means the amount of, is normally how we would translate into English, to the amount of $70 million, of $70 million. So read this all together. Even though, or despite, it hasn't been approved yet, or they haven't been approved yet, Pfizer will donate to India vaccines at the for the amount of, or at the cost of, $70 million. Okay, so that's number 1 headline, breaking news at 11:24 this morning when I took the screenshot. It wasn't 11:24 when I took it, just happened to be scrolling at that time. Okay, that's one. Let's go through the next one. Again, you see, just like in other news sources, very short, quick headlines to see if I wanted to find out more. I could click on any of these and I would get a pop-up window with more information or lead me to the actual article. Okay, this is what I was talking about with traffic, right? Very important. We're in a small country. We have way too many cars on the road. There's been many reports recently about how there are too many private cars on the road and not enough roads for them, and public transportation doesn't set up for it. So here's a great example. משאית פגעה בגשר השלום. כביש 20 ממחלף לגוארדיה לצפון נחסם לתנועה. Okay, what's going on here? משאית is a truck. Okay, so משאית, a truck, פגעה ב. Do you see here this first verb we have here related to this? Is a very important verb. Unfortunately, you hear this a lot. It's used quite a lot as לפגוע ב. לפגוע ב means to hurt or to hit someone or to cause harm or to wound even. In this case, it's talking about a truck hit the Gesher HaShalom. Gesher was a bridge. The name of the bridge is the HaShalom Bridge. And so a bridge, a truck rather, hit or struck the Gesher, the HaShalom Bridge, right? Masa'it pag'a. Pag'a is conjugated for a truck, which is feminine. So it hit ba gesher. It takes the preposition ba afterwards. A truck hit the HaShalom Bridge. Kvish 20 ממחלף לגוארדיה לצפון נחסם לתנועה. Okay, why is this important? So first off, this is all about Tel Aviv. And it's assuming you know this is Tel Aviv, because Gesher HaShalom is a very, very crowded interchange in Tel Aviv, number one. And that's the most famous one that's called the Gesher, the HaShalom Bridge. It's here. Kvish 20. Just like in all other countries, right? Highways, major roads have a number attached to them. Here in Israel, a highway, not a road, a highway is called a kvish, right? This word here in row 47. A kvish is a highway. And just like, certainly in America, I can't speak for other countries, but in the US, right, the way we number our highways indicates how important they are. So you go from 1 digit to 2 digits to 3 digits, there's some even 4 digits. Same thing in Hebrew. Single digit highways, highways that have 1 digit attached to them, are primary highways. They're the biggest, the most important highways. They're the primary ones from which 2 digit highways splinter off, and then you have 3 digit and even 4 digit ones, right? So I already see Kvish 20 is a secondary highway. It's a highway because it's called Kvish, but it's a secondary one. It's branching off of, just like in America, Highway 2, Kvish 2. And I know that because the first number in this series, just like in America, is the number that it's branching off, right? So Kvish 20 is a branch, is a secondary part of Kvish 2. Now, I say this because of the cultural context. I don't suppose that Wolpan is teaching you highways of Israel. It's kind of important because here they're telling you, they're just assuming you know what Kvish 2 is. And if you live here in Israel, particularly if you live in the center of the country, you know Kvish 20, but you probably know it by its other name. Kvish 20 is the technical term for the Ayalon Highway or the Ayalon Expressway or the Ayalon Freeway. It's that major thoroughfare that cuts right in the middle of Tel Aviv, right? That's what it's talking about here. And it's very important to know that because they're assuming, because this is a traffic update, it's for a local audience, right? So this piece is never going to be in times of Israel or Jerusalem Post or Haaretz unless, God forbid, something really bad happened as a result of this accident, which thank God it didn't happen, right? But Kvish 20, if you're living here in Israel, is very important to know because that's a very, very busy thoroughfare. As evidenced by, this is making national news. And Kvish 20, ממחלף לגוארדיה לצפון נחסם לתנועה. Okay? What's important here to know is that it's Kvish 20, aka the Ayalon Freeway or Highway, however you want to say it. ממחלף לגוארדיה, those of you who live here, you know that one of the first, if you're coming from south to north in Tel Aviv, one of the most popular ones coming in is LaGuardia entranceway. It's also pronounced LaGuardia. That's a whole other lesson we'll get to of transliteration into Hebrew one day. But anyways, Kvish Eslim, Letzafon, Nechsam. And that's the most important word here. If we're talking about traffic, Nechsam. Nechsam means was blocked. Okay, so it's again passive tense, very important. So it's the highway was blocked, la tnua. Tnua is traffic or movement, right? So I know very quickly, if I'm skimming over the news, I see the name of a highway, so it probably has something to do with traffic, and it says nechsam la tnua. Excuse me, nechsam la tnua, it was blocked for traffic. Okay, so if I live in Israel and I'm commuting, this is a major thoroughfare for the center of the country, that's rather important for me to know. And then the last one. The last one, again, it wasn't a great news day, a positive news day, but unfortunately, just like in other languages, you got to know the bad words. And I'm not talking curse words, you got to know the bad stuff as much as the good stuff to understand how society works and how to operate in it, right? So the third one, right here, starting in row 51. Ishum. תושב נתניה ביצע עבירות מין בעשרות נערים דרך האינטרנט. Okay, Ishum, right? Because we keep things very short and concise because it's news. Ishum, here in row 51, means a charge or an indictment. Okay, so a charge or indictment, a criminal charge, in other words. Colon, Toshav, resident of Netanya. Toshav Netanya, a resident of Netanya. Bitza, this is our next word, a very common verb that's used in Hebrew. Bitza levatzea means to undertake, to commit. It can also simply mean to do or act, but it's a little bit fancier in meaning. So to undertake or to commit. So a resident of Netanya committed averot min. Okay, sexual offenses. Averot min, one avera. An avera is an offense. A criminal offense. Averot are plural. Min means sex. So sexual offenses. Ba'asrot ne'arim derech ha'internet. On dozens of teenagers via the internet. Again, not the most positive news. Not necessarily going to be translated and broadcast to an international audience, both because of its relevance and also because it's not the most pleasant topic to be sharing with the rest of the world. But unfortunately, just like other countries, Israel does have its share of sexual assaults, but that does make national news because this is a small country. So again, to recap, because we're close to the top of the hour and I see we have a bunch of questions. From this whole top, and this is just the top of Ynet, right? It's ynet.co.il. If you want to look at it on your own, ynet.co.il. Just from this top, we have so much going on, right? We have the categories of the various news and resources at the top. We have the top story, and it tells us this is breaking news, and it's actually an expose that no one else has. And then we have the ticker. We have the breaking news on the right-hand side. All of this lets us know what we can focus on, if whatever translation tools we have at our disposal, or if we want to bother at all. But we can already see quickly and navigate with very little Hebrew at your disposal. Where do I need to look to see what's the most breaking news? What's the most top news, right? For Ynet, for example, it's the top center. And then on the top right, we have all the breaking news. So that's where I need to focus if I want to know what's going on. And if I choose to keep reading, what are some of the context clues that I'm going to see again and again, which are the words that I help translate here for you, that in future articles I know are a key that this is something important to read, or it tells me a little bit more insight that I'm otherwise not going to get. Okay, I see we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to get to as many of them as I can. Let's start at the top. Great, we have a whole bunch of suggestions for future classes. Thank you so much for that. Yes, so like I wrote, I'm responding to Sharon here with the URL, the website of the website that we're looking at for Ynet, which is ynet.co.il. Bonnie asks, can we read Ynet in English in the US? You absolutely can. It's called Ynet News. You even see that here on the screen, right? It says Ynet News, the English right there. But again, it's not breaking news. If it's breaking news, someone's had a good shift on that day or they hired new English speakers, because chances are it's not going to be as up to date as the Hebrew language is, the Hebrew language news is. Always, in terms of priority, will be Hebrew language news for local audience to know what's going on. Okay. Sharon asks again, is mechdal like fashla? Yes, except mechdal is proper Hebrew. Mechdal is a human or technical error. Fashla is another word, that one of the many words that we have in Hebrew that can be generally translated as an error or a mistake or a screw up. But mechdal is something that's a lot more inherently wrong. A fashla could be something that you accidentally did. Mechdal indicates more than just pure accident. Okay. Oleh asks, I thought ticket was knas. Great question. Knas is a fine, right? Those of you who are following along in the Q&A, knas, and I will write in the answering her, is spelled like this in Hebrew. Knas is a fine, but the actual ticket that you get is called a duach. Okay, it's not called a knas. When you get that at the top, it will say duach on it. Duach al knas, it might say, the report of a fine, right? Or citation for a fine, but it's not going to just say knas. Howard asks a great question. I always have trouble with abbreviations. Is there a reference that would help me look them up? There are some great dictionaries out there. If I can pull together some of them, I will. A great website and resource for you as you're learning specific words, not in general how to read Hebrew in its cultural context, but specific ones is the one that's run by Jacob Richman. It's jr.co.il. And I believe he has a running list of popularly used abbreviations and acronyms there. But also more up-to-date dictionaries, Hebrew English dictionaries should have a list also of them. Okay. And like I said, Ynet News in Hebrew is ynet.co.il, ynet.co.il. Lila, depending on her pronunciation, what is the secret to pronouncing words written without vowels? Practice. Short answer, practice. Long answer, Hebrew is a very, despite what you may think, and I hear this a lot from fellow English speakers, particularly Americans, have a lot of hard time learning Hebrew. Hebrew is a very logical language. It's in fact much more logical than English is, because like I talked about before, those three letters that when you plug it into a form, come up with a word. When you learn the meanings of the roots, and then you learn those structures, you can figure out almost any word. And with those structures come very specific vowel sounds and patterns that repeat again and again. So a lot of it is learning it and repetition of it. And you get to a point where even if you make a mistake, it's such a small, minute mistake that a native Hebrew speaker will easily understand, because chances are they forget too, because we don't write, we don't have letters that represent vowel sounds in Hebrew. Okay. Nechama, can we do a future class with the word, with the root resh gimel shin? Absolutely. Great question, Colin. This was the other thing I want to say about highways. You can also determine not just is it a primary, secondary, tertiary highway, you can also determine the orientation of the highway in Israel very quickly. If the number is a prime number, it goes, it's latitude. It goes east to west or west to east. If it's an even number, it goes north to south or south to north, depending on where you are. So let's go through really quickly. I don't have a map with me, but really quickly, some of the most important highways in Israel. Kvish Echad, Highway 1, goes like this, from the Dead Sea to the Mediterranean coast with Jerusalem and Tel Aviv in its middle, right? And that goes horizontal. Kvish Shtaim that we talked about just now. Kvish Shtaim is also called Kvish Achov, the coastal highway. This is the road that goes up Israel's Mediterranean coast from south to north. So that's going up, right? Kvish Aslim, that was in our article just now, the Ayalon highway, is parallel to the Kvish Achov. So it's also going south to north, north to south. We have Kvish Shesh. Kvish Shesh, Highway 6, is Israel's first toll road. That also, because its number is even, I know it goes down to up north or south, south to north, based on where you are. And the longest road in Israel, Kvish Tishim, Highway 90, goes from the very top of Israel at Metula all the way to Eilat. It's a secondary highway, so it's not as large as some of the single-digit ones, but it's the longest highway in Israel. Okay, so very good question. Prime numbers are east-west, even numbers north-south. Odelia asks, I hear Kvish is used as a regular road all the time. So again, to make that distinction in Israel, when you use the word Kvish, it's talking about maybe roads in general, but it's specifically referring to a highway. A rechov is a street, but Kvish is always a highway, right? So for example, I live on Nachmani. I would never call the street called Nachmani here in Tel Aviv, Kvish Nachmani, because that would imply it's a highway. It is most definitely not. It has terrible traffic. It's one lane. It is a Rechov Nachmani. It's Nachmani Street. Okay. Anne asks, how does one get an earlier story later in the day? So great question. If you look again at this screenshot, that red bar where it says Mivzakim, that ticker, if you click on it, it will go to a page that has all the breaking news of that day for usually the past 24 hours. So you can click on any of those headlines to see what happened. So if something's happening and you didn't catch up and it's already updated itself, you can already look and see, you can already check for yourself. Okay. Just scrolling through some of these questions because we've had some of these already. Miriam asks, yes, each week is a different class. You can get a recording of this, like we said, on Nefesh B'Nefesh's YouTube channel to repeat it, to go back to it. If you can't sign up if you can't participate in 1 week, or 1 week isn't as relevant to you or not, you're welcome to go and check back and see it. But every week is a different topic because we've got plenty to talk about here in Israel and in Hebrew. Deborah, yes, the vocabulary list is what I shared here on the screen. Again, you'll get the recording. You'll be able to go line by line and write it down, jot it down, review them on their own. Bonnie asks a great question. Is Times of Israel as good or accurate a source of what Israel news as Ynet? Are you familiar with 1010 Wins? I went to NYU, so I do know 1010 Wins. Like I said, English language media from Israel, Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post, Haaretz, I-24, ILTV are not built, are not made with a local made in Israel audience in mind. That's certainly a number of their consumers, but it's meant for an international audience. So if you want news that's relating to living here in Israel, it's Hebrew. It's going to be Hebrew. Times of Israel is probably the closest in translating as quickly as possible local news, but they're not going to have the traffic updates, for example. And they're not necessarily going to have crime updates like we read as well. 1010 Wins is Israeli news, right? We are obsessed with reading the news here in Israel. We have hourly updates on the radio, on TV, online. And now because of 24-hour news, you can get on breaking news all the time online through these websites. Okay. Leonard asks, can we go over shopping? Absolutely, we do shopping quite a bit. I love that topic and going through how to read a nutritional value label in Hebrew, what are all the words for elements and various nutritional values in Hebrew. Absolutely, we'll do that again. Randall asks, can you please explain why vowels are not shown? Really quick, because we're running out of time. In Hebrew, we do not, Hebrew is, the letters that we have in Hebrew represent sounds. We would associate those sounds more with consonants in American English terms than we do with vowels. Vowels are represented by dots and bars, again, because of its mathematical nature. I can take a word with 4 letters and I can pronounce it in multiple ways, that mean multiple things based on the vowels in it. So it's easier, it's more cost effective to have the same reading and based on its context, understand its meaning. You'll get used to it. If you're learning Hebrew at an introductory level, you'll always have nikud, those dots and bars to indicate vowel sounds. As we get you to a more fluent level, you'll see there are no dots and bars unless the word has to be explained, lest it be understood in a different way. Okay. Ruth asked, I read this headline where it seems mechdal. No, you, I'm sorry, Ruth, you read the word incorrectly. Mechdal, with a dalid, is the word that we had today. Mechdal is a oversight or screw up. Mechabel is a very different word with a bet. Mechdal, mechabel. Mechabel is the word in modern Hebrew for a terrorist. Okay? Spelling in Hebrew, and this is a very important point I make every week. I'm happy to make it every week, every other minute. Spelling in Hebrew is destiny. You cannot misspell in Hebrew. You will be completely misunderstood. Spelling is very important. So that can pose a challenge to people who have dyslexia, to people who have issues with spelling. But spelling in Hebrew is very, very critical. Even letters that in modern Hebrew may sound alike are not interchangeable. You cannot do that in Hebrew. It changes the word dramatically. So mechdal, mechabel, very important spelling. I see that you got you misread it, but still a very important point to make. Really quick because we're running out of time. Can you give a class on how to call? Yes, we do have a class that we've done in the past on automated menus. So for those of you asking how to call cable companies, how to call Kupat Cholim, how to call Bezik, how to call all those things, I'm not going to do an individual one, right? That's not my role here, and that's not me as a dictionary. I will take you through, though, the automated menus, because 8 times out of 10, all the automated menus, regardless of who you're calling, are exactly the same and use the exact same words. We're going to do that, I promise. Knas, we did. Thanks for correcting my math. I am not great at math. Prime versus odd. Sorry if that confused you all, but yes, odd numbers. This isn't a math class, but thank you again for the correction. Okay, I need to stop here. I see there's a bunch of other questions. But again, thank you all for joining. You will get a recording of this being uploaded onto Nefesh B'Nefesh's website, YouTube channel. If you want to be sure that you get all of them, you can just click and subscribe on Nefesh B'Nefesh's account on YouTube, or simply go up to it at your leisure. Thank you again for joining. You have the registration link for our upcoming classes. Again, Mondays at 8 p.m. local time here in Israel. Where everywhere else in the world, thank you for joining us. It's very important that if you have any questions, feel free to be in touch. If you have any requests for specific topics, by all means, we're all ears for that. So again, thank you all for joining. Hope to see you all soon for our next week's. And until then, as we say in Hebrew, todah rabah, first off, thank you very much, and lehitraot, see you all soon.